Hydraulic fracturing is a very unconventional, unregulated process. It's a last-ditch effort to extract the last remaining oil and gas minerals in the entire planet.
Hello, I'm Kimberlie Acosta with IndianCountryTV, and I'm here with Shane Davis. He's a fractivist from Colorado. Can you tell us what that's all about?
What is fractivism? Colorado has over 52,000 active hydraulic fracturing wells for natural gas and oil. Fractivist means that we're against that. So we're saying no to fracking. Just as Winona pointed out, fracking is the actual source of those babies coming down the river. So what I do in Colorado is organize hundreds of thousands of people to create organizations to put in place moratoria and also bans on hydraulic fracturing. So in the last 5 years, we've shut down the entire eastern Rocky Mountains against the oil and gas industry, so they cannot conduct fracking.
Can you explain to me what fracking is and how it affects our environment?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Hydraulic fracturing is a very unconventional, unregulated process. It's a last-ditch effort to extract the last remaining oil and gas minerals in the entire planet. And so fracking, actually, they drill down into the earth about 7,000 or 8,000 feet, sometimes deeper, and they have guns that go down into the ground, and they have these explosions with depleted uranium. They want to crack open that shale formation. Then they force what would be fresh water. The oil and gas industry steals or buys water from municipal systems. So a single fracking well can use 2 to 4 million gallons of potable, fresh drinking water. They put over 700 different chemicals in it and radioactive materials after they've cracked open that shale formation with the explosions and force that water and sand and chemicals down into the formation to hold open those fractures so that the natural gas, which is now unnatural gas because it's radioactive, and oil can be released to the surface. So it's a very unregulated industry. There is a 2005 Halliburton loophole, which the oil and gas industry is the only industry that does not have to abide by certain provisions under the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, the Superfund Act, and there are many, many, many more. So it's a very unconventional, extreme, desperate method to extract yet another fossil fuel.
And why are they so desperate to go to this kind of level?
Well, because as Winona pointed out, the oil and gas industry has tapped all of the conventional methods. Remember the TV show, I think it was Jed Clampett or something like that?
Beverly Hillbillies?
Beverly Hillbillies, yeah. So all of those pockets of oil that have risen from deep pockets down below. See, keep in mind that the oil and natural gas is made in the shale formation, and then it floats to the top. Those conventional methods of extracting oil and gas are gone. So the industry wants to hurry up and extract as much of the remaining or the oil and gas minerals where it's actually made so that they can export it patriotically to China, so that jobs in the manufacturing houses and the sweatshops continue, which then forces a manufacturing squeeze to make more plastic junk to sell Americans more plastic junk. So it's a manufacturing and a consumer squeeze. So the industry is not thinking smart. We are smarter than a fossil fuel. All we want is smart technologies, which is healthy energy. We've got sun. I mean, a solar spill, what does that produce? More energy? It's pretty smart, right? So we're against the destructive, hazardous methods of fossil fuel extraction. And my new program, which is the Extreme Hydrocarbon Survey, keeping in mind that all of those well pads that you see have tanks. Most people that I talk to, I point out those tanks, they think they hold water for agricultural areas. They don't. They hold liquid toxic waste. It's industrial waste that's radioactive. It has crude oil and waters from ancient seabeds that are very radioactive. But since the oil and gas industry is exempt under the Clean Air Act, they can release those hydrocarbon vapors into the air. You can't see them because they're invisible. They move under a different spectrum of light. And so I have a piece of government technology. It's called thermography or infrared camera technology, just like the film that you're filming on now, except it can see invisible wavelengths. And it also has a chemical sniffer. The oil and gas industry can emit these hydrocarbon vapors into the air and poison us. So that's what's happening right now. Where I lived in Colorado, I had 22,000 active oil and gas wells active in my county. And so I had over 75 wells around my house. So I had a bloody nose for a year and a half. I had headaches, just insane burning eyes, burning throat, things like that. And it comes from those hydrocarbons that are being released, but nobody can see them, so you can't tell that they're there. So my new survey is actually using infrared technology to find out where those point sources of pollution are, show where they're going, and then the chemical sniffer on it can actually detect what kinds of chemicals are being released. When I lived in the gas patch, I had my blood tested. I had ethylbenzene, styrene, hexanes, all kinds of oil and gas industry chemicals in my blood. Why? Because they're allowed under the 2005 Energy Policy Act to release these poisons from their industrial sites into our air that we breathe, that you and I share. So my program will actually show where these poisons are being released and who's being affected.
How long have you been fighting this fight?
About 5 years. I was a park ranger for many years, and then I worked for Department of Defense overseas. But I realized that protecting our environment was fruitless because the law, the oppressive structure, that mechanism is not designed for us or for the environment or for our health. And once I realized that I was a data miner, so I acquired millions of documents of state and oil and gas industry documents. Once I acquired those, I started going through and investigating the different types of things that were happening that the industry was culpable for. To give you an example, Colorado's largest aquifer was contaminated in 2009 by oil and gas energy and production with fracking chemicals and also fracking gas, which is called thermogenic methane. Biogenic is natural. That's the decay of organic carbon-based materials like dinosaurs and trees. So that's natural gas. The thermogenic gas comes from the fracking process. Extreme heat, extreme explosion, extreme unconventional methods. So our aquifer was contaminated, and I reviewed 1,000 spill reports in Colorado, and 40% of all operator spills, oil and gas spills, resulted in groundwater contamination. And so when you think of North Dakota, who's just getting started with mineral extraction, hydraulic fracturing, it's an enormous, insane boom right now. That when you look at Colorado, you can see clearly what's going to happen in North Dakota. Aquifers are going to be contaminated, groundwater is going to be poisoned, our air is already toxic. We have to move out of those areas. The harmful part is that the industry can set up shop and put their industrial well pads 150 feet from your house. That's completely inhumane to poison children and the earth. And so if North Dakota thinks they're having a boom, they're in for a big bust health-wise, and their ecosystems are going to collapse.
You're working with Winona LaDuke. How did you get connected with Winona, and what's the project you're working on?
So I was at a friend's house in Boulder, Colorado, and I was standing inside the house, and I heard somebody talking about fracking outside, but I couldn't see her. And she was talking about this article she read. It was a 7-page article on fracking in Colorado. And she walks in the door and she said, and I was reading about you. And we just were standing there face to face, and it was an incredible connection that when you have two people that really deeply care about the environment and our people, and not just sustainability, but thrivability for future generations. It was kind of a no-brainer that we started a discussion, and we had a great chat, great talk, and she invited me up here, and so thank you. Talking with Winona, and I was explaining my extreme hydrocarbon survey using the infrared cameras, and she said, wow, that technology could be used up north in the tribal nations and the territories to at least protect the people so they know where these types of poisonous gases are coming from. And so that was a really big interest of hers. And I'm just getting started with the program now. And so I hope to share it with everyone that needs it, especially the tribes.
Do you have a website or a place people can go to learn more about what you're working on and educate people about fracking?
Sure. I have 2 websites. One is called fractivist.org, and the other one is extremehydrocarbonsurvey.org. You can find on fractivist.org, you can see all of the documents that I expose about the oil and gas industry, a lot of the surveys, investigations, and actual research studies that I've done. On extremehydrocarbonsurvey.org, you'll get the entire scope of the program that we have using the infrared technology.
If you had one message you could leave with Indian Country, what would that be?
Hope is here, and it's all of us. All of us. We are smarter than a fossil fuel. I don't have one word. I have a lot of words. We are smarter than a fossil fuel, and it's going to take all of us to protect these sacred lands, this air, and this water that we all share. These are the only things that we need to thrive.
I want to thank you for joining me. Kimberlie Acosta with Indian Country TV.
All of those well pads that you see have tanks. Most people that I talk to, I point out those tanks, they think they hold water for agricultural areas. They don't. They hold liquid toxic waste. It's industrial waste that's radioactive. It has crude oil and waters from ancient seabeds that are very radioactive. But since the oil and gas industry is exempt under the Clean Air Act, they can release those hydrocarbon vapors into the air. You can't see them because they're invisible. They move under a different spectrum of light.